The first time I died, it was to the polite, tinkling applause of 100 of the city's most influential people. I died in a ballroom of ivory and gold, under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, with the scent of lilies and champagne hanging heavy in the air. I died with my heart in my throat and a smear of Noah's condescending pity on my cheek. It was the night of the Delacroix annual Patron's dinner, an event that served as the gravitational center of their family's social universe. For generations, the Delacroix name had been synonymous with old money and civic leadership, but their true power flowed from a single formidable source, the Vance Foundation, and its matriarch, Mrs. Eleanor Vance. To be the Delacroix family's patron was to be their kingmaker. Mrs. Vance's approval dictated which boards Mr. Delacroix sat on, which charities his wife Catherine chaired, and, most importantly, which of their children would be anointed as the next generation's cultural scion. That anointing came in the form of the Vance Foundation's Next Generation Grant, a prize so prestigious it didn't just launch a career, it forged one from stardust and steel, and that year, everyone knew it was meant for me. I was Sophie, the quiet, focused art student from the other side of the tracks, the one who had somehow captured the heart of their golden boy, Noah Delacroix. Our love story was the talk of the town, the handsome heir and the gifted scholarship girl. I believed in it. I believed in him. He was my fiercest champion, my most ardent supporter. He held my hand during my scholarship interviews, brought me coffee during late-night study sessions, and whispered endless encouragement as I poured my soul onto canvases for the grant submission. My art was my voice, a fusion of classical portraiture and raw, abstract emotion. It was honest. It was everything I was. Noah claimed to love it. He claimed to love me. The dinner was meant to be our triumph, the culmination of a year's hard work and the unofficial announcement of our engagement. My hand still tingled from the memory of him sliding his grandmother's ring onto my finger just 2 nights before, the diamond cold and heavy with the weight of his family's legacy. The ballroom buzzed with anticipation. I sat at the head table, a shy satellite to the blazing sun of the Delacroix family. Catherine, Noah's mother, offered me thin, brittle smiles that never reached her eyes. His father gave me perfunctory nods, and his younger sister Isabel, a girl who wore her boredom like a designer gown, barely acknowledged my existence. I saw it all through the shimmering haze of love, interpreting their coolness as the caution of a dynasty, not the chill of an impending execution. Then came the toast. Mr. Delacroix stood, his voice booming with practiced bonhomie. He spoke of legacy, of nurturing new talent, of the unbreakable bond between his family and the Vance Foundation. His eyes swept the room, landing finally on Mrs. Vance, who watched him with an unnervingly still and patient gaze. Then, he passed the floor to his son. Noah rose, every inch the charming prince. He smiled, a warm, magnetic smile that had always made my knees weak. It looked the same as ever, but I see it now for what it was. A beautifully crafted mask. "Thank you, Father," he began, his voice smooth as velvet. "And thank you, Mrs. Vance, for your continued faith in our vision. The Next Generation Grant is more than an award. It's a declaration of the future." He turned his eyes to me, and the whole room followed his gaze. I felt a blush creep up my neck. This was it. "Art," he continued, his voice taking on a professorial tone, "must be more than just passion. It requires rigor, a deep understanding of context, a vision that transcends mere technical skill." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Tonight, we are here to celebrate an artist who embodies that very principle. An artist who has pushed past the facile trends of the moment to create something truly enduring." He gestured to the large projector screen at the end of the room. Often, in the rush of youthful expression, an artist can lose their way, mistaking raw, unformed emotion for profound insight. My breath caught. The screen flickered to life. On it was a picture of my charcoal preliminary sketch for my grant submission, a raw, messy, exploratory piece I kept in my private portfolio. It was never meant for public view. I felt a cold dread begin to seep into my bones. Noah had been in my studio just last week. He'd told me he was organizing my files for the digital submission, a gesture I'd found impossibly sweet. This, Noah said, his voice laced with a gentle, patronizing sadness, is a perfect example of talent without direction. The potential is there, certainly, but it is untempered. It is incomplete. He clicked a button. Beside my stolen sketch, another image appeared. A polished, hyper-realistic oil painting of a lone ballerina, rendered with icy, photorealistic precision. It was technically flawless and emotionally sterile. And this, Noah announced, his voice swelling with pride, is the destination. This is vision. This is the future. He smiled benevolently at me as if he were a teacher correcting a beloved but hopeless student. My fiancée, Sophie, has such passion, and with time and guidance, I have no doubt her work will one day reach these heights. But the Vance Foundation grant isn't for potential. It's for achievement. And there is one artist whose achievement this year was simply undeniable. The room was silent, a collective intake of breath. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. This couldn't be happening. This was a nightmare. I looked at Noah, pleading with my eyes, but he wouldn't meet my gaze. He was looking at his sister. So it is with immense pride, he declared, that I ask you all to join me in congratulating this year's winner of the Next Generation Grant, my brilliant sister, Isabelle Delacroix. The applause was scattered at first, then grew, fueled by social obligation. I saw it all in horrifying slow motion. Isabel rising with a practiced, modest smile. Catherine dabbing a tear from her eye, her face a mask of triumphant relief. Mr. Delacroix beaming at his two children, a perfect tableau of dynastic succession. They had planned this, every word, every gesture. My humiliation was not a byproduct of their success, it was a necessary component. They needed to disqualify me to elevate one of their own. And Noah had been the architect of it all. He had used my love, my trust, to steal my work and orchestrate my public downfall, all to secure his sister's fraudulent victory. The painting, I realized with a sickening lurch, was not just sterile, it was a lie. I had seen the work of the obscure European digital artist it was copied from. I looked across the table, past the smiling faces, and my eyes met those of Eleanor Vance. She was the only one not applauding. Her face was an unreadable cipher of polite observation, her gaze resting on me with a weight I couldn't comprehend. There was no pity in her eyes, no anger, just a deep, unnerving stillness. Then the room began to spin. The scent of lilies became cloying, suffocating. I pushed back my chair, the screech of it scraping against the marble floor. I heard Noah say my name, a whisper of false concern. I didn't look back. I fled. I ran from the ballroom, from the whispers and stares, from the wreckage of my life, the mocking echo of polite applause chasing me out into the cold night. That night, my life didn't just derail, it shattered. The engagement was broken. The news spun by the Delacroix family's PR team as a mutual, amicable decision. I was a footnote in their story of triumph. I dropped out of my program, unable to face the pitying looks of my professors and the smirks of my peers. The fire in me, the spark that created my art, was extinguished, drowned in a sea of shame and betrayal. I died that night, and for a long gray year, I remained a ghost. Until I woke up. It wasn't a dream, it was a jolt, a violent and absolute recalibration of reality. One moment, I was lying in my drab, cramped apartment, the gray light of another meaningless morning filtering through the dusty window. The next, I was gasping for air, my heart pounding with a terror so visceral, it felt like a physical impact. The air in my lungs was different. It was cleaner, tinged with the faint, expensive scent of lavender and beeswax. My hands were resting on cool, high thread count sheets. Sunlight, brilliant and golden, streamed through a large bay window, illuminating a room I hadn't seen in over a year. My old dorm room at the Art Academy, the one Noah had helped me move into. I scrambled out of bed, my legs trembling. My portfolio case was leaning against the desk, the one that held my grant submission. My phone, lying on the nightstand, showed the date, 3 weeks before the Patron's dinner, it was impossible. A stroke, a psychotic break. I splashed cold water on my face in the adjoining bathroom, staring at my reflection. It was me, but a version of me I hadn't seen in a year. The dark circles of exhaustion and despair were gone. The defeated slump of my shoulders was absent. My eyes, my eyes were clear. And behind the shock, a cold, hard ember was beginning to glow. The memories of the past year, the humiliation, the heartbreak, the slow, grinding erosion of my soul were not a dream. They were a scar etched onto my mind with perfect, terrifying clarity. I had lived it, I had died it, and now I was back at the beginning. The first wave was pure, paralyzing panic. I had to run, to get out, to warn myself, but how? What would I even say? Don't trust your loving, devoted fiancé because in 3 weeks he's going to systematically destroy your entire life for the sake of his mediocre sister? They would think I was insane. Noah, with his perfect smile and unimpeachable reputation, would look at me with concern and everyone would believe him. Then came the second wave. Not panic, but ice. Cold, clear, and utterly calm. My terror solidified into a diamond-hard resolve. I had been given a second chance. A chance to do what exactly? Avoid the pain? Avert the disaster? No, averting it wasn't enough. Simply escaping the fire was a victory for them. They would find another way to achieve their goals, another talented girl to use and discard. The humiliation I endured wasn't just an attack on me, it was an attack on the very principles of art and integrity they claimed to champion. My breath steadied. My trembling hands became still. I walked back to my desk and sat down, my mind racing, replaying every sycophantic smile, every condescending word, every calculated gesture from that night. I had been a lamb led to slaughter. This time, I would be the butcher. My internal mantra solidified, a phrase that would guide my every action for the next 3 weeks. It was not a cry for vengeance, but a statement of strategy. This time, I let the room see itself one. I would not be the target of the spotlight. I would be the one aiming it. My first move was one of quiet deception. I knew Noah would soon make an excuse to come to my studio, to help me organize my digital submission. I knew he was looking for my preliminary sketches to use as his weapon. So, I gave him something to find. I spent 2 days creating a new set of sketches, ones that were deliberately theatrical in their passion, full of half-formed ideas and technical flaws that looked authentic to a layman but would be obvious to a true connoisseur. I left them in a portfolio labeled exploratory and tucked my real polished work away. The core of my plan, however, required a much bigger risk. It required an ally. Not just any ally, but the most powerful piece on the board. I couldn't win this game by playing defense. I had to flip the entire table. I had to get to Eleanor Vance. In my first life, I had seen her as an untouchable deity, a distant star in the Delacroix orbit. Now I saw her for what she was. A shrewd, discerning woman of immense power whose primary concern was not the Delacroix family, but the integrity and prestige of her own foundation too. The Delacroix were not her family, they were her beneficiaries, and beneficiaries could be replaced. Getting a meeting with her was the first hurdle. A direct request from me, a mere student, would be ignored. I needed a pretext. I remembered from my first life that Isabel's winning piece was a direct, albeit skillfully rendered copy of a piece by a niche Czech digital artist named Petra Vokunova. At the time, I had been too devastated to do anything with that knowledge. Now, it was my key. I spent a day in the library's computer lab, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I compiled a dossier. Side-by-side comparisons of Isabel's painting and Vokunova's original work. The dates of publication, proving Vokunova's was created years earlier. Then, I began digging into the Vance Foundation's charter, which was, thankfully, a public document. And there it was, in crisp legal language, a zero-tolerance integrity clause. Any submission found to be plagiarized or any individual found to have knowingly misrepresented work to the committee would result in the immediate disqualification of the artist and a formal review of any and all patronage connected to them. This was my sword, but I still needed a way to get into the room to wield it. My second ally came from a less likely place. Leo was a lanky, perpetually caffeinated student in the Media Tech Program 3. We'd worked together on a collaborative project the year before. He was brilliant, cynical, and had a deep-seated disdain for the wealthy, entitled students who treated his department like their personal IT help desk. He was, in short, the perfect co-conspirator. I found him in the dark, cool AV room, surrounded by monitors and coiled cables. I didn't tell him the whole truth. Instead, I framed it as an artistic experiment. "Leo, I need your help with a piece of performance art," I said, keeping my voice even and professional. He swiveled in his chair, raising a skeptical eyebrow. "Performance art? I thought you were a painter." "I'm branching out," I said with a small conspiratorial smile. "It's for the Patron's dinner at the Delacroix estate. I need to be able to control the main projector for about 60 seconds during the presentation portion of the evening. I want to flash a series of images as a commentary on artistic authenticity." His eyes lit up with interest. The Delacroix were exactly the kind of people he loved to subtly antagonize. "You want to hijack their projector at their own fancy party to make a statement? That's not performance art, that's a declaration of war. I'm in." He showed me how he could access the venue's system remotely, giving me a simple, discrete interface on my phone. One tap would override whatever was on screen and play the media file I had preloaded. I now had my delivery system. Finally, armed with my evidence and my technical support, I made my move on Mrs. Vance. I didn't request a meeting, I engineered one. I knew from Noah's loose chatter in my past life that Mrs. Vance was a creature of habit. Every Tuesday afternoon, she visited a small private gallery downtown that her foundation supported. I went there, my portfolio in hand. Not the portfolio with my grant submission, but a different one filled with my strongest, most innovative portraits. I didn't approach her. I simply found a quiet corner and began sketching the gallery's curator, a man I knew she admired. I let her see me. I let her observe my focus, my skill. After nearly an hour, she approached, her footsteps silent on the polished concrete floor. "That's a remarkable likeness," she said, her voice a low, melodious hum. I looked up, feigning a slight surprise. "Thank you, Mrs. Vance. He has a fascinating face." "You're Sophie," she stated, not as a question. "Noah Delacroix's young woman." "I am," I said, meeting her gaze directly. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady. This was the moment. "And I am also an artist who believes the Vance Foundation is being defrauded." Her expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of something in her sharp, intelligent eyes. Interest. I had her attention. "That's a very serious accusation," she said, her tone cool. "I know," I replied, "and I have proof." We sat in a private office in the back of the gallery for the next hour. I didn't cry, I didn't plead. I presented my case with the cool, dispassionate logic of a lawyer 4,444. I laid out the side-by-side images of Isabel's and Petra Vokunova's work. I showed her the Foundation's own Integrity Clause 5. I explained, without a trace of melodrama, that I had reason to believe the Delacroix family was knowingly promoting a plagiarized piece to secure the grant for their daughter. I didn't mention Noah by name. I didn't mention my own coming humiliation. I framed the entire issue around the one thing I knew she cared about more than anything: the sterling, unimpeachable reputation of her foundation and her name. I wasn't a victim seeking rescue. I was a future stakeholder alerting her to a critical vulnerability in her organization. She listened, her fingers steepled, her eyes never leaving my face. When I was finished, she was silent for a long time. The only sound was the faint hum of the gallery's climate control. "You have courage," she said finally, "and a strategist's mind. These are qualities far rarer and more valuable than mere talent." She tapped a perfectly manicured finger on the printout of Isabel's painting. "The Delacroix have grown comfortable, complacent. They have forgotten that my patronage is an investment, not an inheritance." She rose from her chair. "Leave this with me. The committee will conduct a formal review. In the meantime, you will say nothing of this to anyone. You will attend the dinner as planned. You will act as if nothing is amiss. Let them play their hand." As I was about to leave my hand on the doorknob, she spoke again. "And Sophie?" I turned back. "Your own work," she said, gesturing to the portfolio I'd brought. It is exceptional, far more interesting than this derivative piece. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. The foundation does not reward potential. It rewards vision. And you, my dear, have vision. I walked out of that gallery and into the bright afternoon sun, feeling not the relief of a battle avoided, but the cold, thrilling certainty of a war already won. All I had to do now was wait for the enemy to walk onto the battlefield I had so carefully prepared. The night of the Patron's dinner arrived, draped in a cool, late autumn mist. In my first life, I had spent the day in a fever of anxiety and excitement. This time, I was a placid lake, my depths still and cold. I dressed with meticulous care in a simple, elegant gown of deep emerald green. No frills, no lace. Just a clean, sharp silhouette. It was the armor of a woman who knew her own worth, not one seeking the approval of others. Noah arrived to pick me up, his face a perfect mask of loving adoration. He fussed over me, telling me how beautiful I looked, how this was going to be the greatest night of our lives. The lies dripped from his tongue like honey, and I accepted them with a serene smile. I let him take my hand, his touch feeling not like a lover's embrace, but like the cold grip of a specimen I was examining under a microscope. We arrived at the Delacroix estate, a sprawling stone mansion that seemed to command the very landscape around its six. The long driveway was lined with flaming torches, casting flickering shadows against the manicured hedges. The air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and money. We walked into the grand foyer, and for a moment the memory of my first life's flight, the desperate, sobbing escape, hit me with a physical force. I could almost feel the phantom tears on my cheeks. I took a slow, deliberate breath, anchoring myself in the now, in the plan. My role tonight was simple. Be the placid, unsuspecting girlfriend. Let them build their stage. Catherine Delacroix greeted us, her cheeks flushed with excitement. She kissed Noah, then gave me an air kiss that landed a full 6 inches from my face. "Sophie, dear, you look adequate," she said, her eyes already scanning the room for more important guests. Isabel drifted by, offering a languid, dismissive wave. "Good luck tonight, Sophie," she said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet condescension that I now understood was pure mockery. "Hope you're not too disappointed." "I'm sure tonight will be full of surprises," I replied, my smile never wavering. The first part of the evening passed in a blur of champagne, canapes, and meaningless chatter. I played my part to perfection. I was quiet, demure, holding Noah's hand, looking up at him with what I hoped appeared to be doe-eyed adoration. He was in his element, gliding through the crowd, accepting congratulations for a victory he hadn't yet officially announced. He was a king holding court, and I was his pretty temporary ornament. He pulled me into a secluded alcove, his expression turning serious. "Soph," he said, his voice a low, intimate murmur. "Whatever happens tonight, I want you to know that I love you. My family, they can be a lot to handle, but we're a team, always." It was the preemptive strike. The words meant to soften the blow, to frame his betrayal as a complex family matter, rather than the brutal act of sabotage it was. In my first life, these words had confused me, made me think I was the one misinterpreting things. Now they were just data points, confirming the sequence of events. "Of course, Noah," I said, touching his cheek. "Always." The guests were called to dinner. The ballroom was just as I remembered, a sea of ivory and gold, glowing under the light of a dozen chandeliers. I found my seat at the head table, the same seat where my life had previously ended. Noah squeezed my hand under the table. "Showtime," he whispered. But as the servers began to move through the room with the first course, the grand double doors of the ballroom swung open again, causing a stir. A footman stood at attention, his voice ringing out. "Mrs. Eleanor Vance." A hush fell over the room 7. Heads turned. This was not her usual entrance. She was already present, having mingled during the cocktail hour. This was something else. This was a statement. Eleanor Vance stood in the doorway, a figure of absolute regal authority in a gown of deep sapphire silk. And on her arm, looking serene and impeccably elegant, was a woman the Delacroix family had clearly not been expecting. It was me. Of course, I was already seated at the table. This was a projection, a life-sized, high-definition video feed displayed on a screen so seamlessly integrated into the doorway, it was imperceptible. It was Leo's genius at work. But for a few surreal seconds, the room saw two Sophies, the quiet girl at the head table and the powerful, confident woman making a grand entrance with the one person whose opinion truly mattered. The projection faded as Mrs. Vance herself stepped forward, detaching herself from the arm of her spectral companion and gliding toward the head table. The room broke into confused whispers. I felt Noah's hand tighten on mine, his knuckles white. He was looking from me to the empty doorway, his perfect composure finally cracking. "Eleanor," Catherine said, rising shakily, "what a dramatic entrance." "One must make an impression," Mrs. Vance said smoothly, her eyes sweeping over the table before landing on me with a look of warm approval. "There is so much remarkable talent in this room. It deserves to be properly acknowledged." The dinner that followed was an exercise in extreme tension. The Delacroix were rattled. Their carefully constructed narrative had been disrupted before it had even begun. They kept shooting me nervous, questioning glances. I offered them nothing but a calm, pleasant smile. I ate my sea bass. I sipped my wine. I was a bomb, sitting silently at their table, and they could hear the faint, terrifying tick of the clock. Finally, the moment came. Mr. Delacroix, his confidence visibly frayed, stood to give his toast. He stumbled over his words, his usual booming voice reduced to a reedy imitation. He rushed through the pleasantries about legacy and patronage, his eyes darting toward Mrs. Vance, who watched him with the placid interest of a biologist observing a frantic specimen. He then passed the floor to Noah. Noah stood, straightening his tie. He tried to summon his usual charm, but his smile was tight, strained. He looked at me, a flicker of desperation in his eyes, as if seeking the naive, trusting girl he thought he knew. He wouldn't find her. She was gone. "Art," he began, his voice hoarse, attempting to restart his script. "Art must be more than just passion. It requires—" "If I may," a clear, calm voice cut through the room like fine crystal eight. It was Eleanor Vance. She had risen to her feet, her presence commanding the absolute attention of every person in the ballroom. Noah froze, his mouth half open. "Thank you, Noah," she said, her voice cool and precise. "But as the founder of the institution bestowing this honor, I believe the announcement of the Next Generation grant should come from me." A wave of shock rippled through the audience. This was a stunning breach of protocol. The Delacroix looked as if they had been struck by lightning. Just as Mrs. Vance began to speak, I reached for my phone under the table. My thumb hovered over the single icon Leo had created for me. My heart gave a single, hard thud. It was time. This time, I let the room see itself. I pressed the button 9. "The Vance Foundation," Mrs. Vance began, her voice resonating with authority, "is built on a single inviolable principle: integrity." As she said the word, the large projector screen at the end of the room, the one Noah had planned to use for my humiliation, flickered to life 10. But it wasn't my sketches that appeared. It was a side-by-side comparison 11. On the left was Isabel's polished, sterile painting of the ballerina. On the right was a screenshot of Petra Vokunova's original digital art, complete with a timestamp from 3 years prior. The similarity was not just striking, it was absolute. It was theft, pure and simple. A collective gasp swept through the ballroom. "Integrity," Mrs. Vance repeated, her voice turning to ice, "is the bedrock of art. It's the quality that separates a true visionary from a mere technician. Or, in some unfortunate cases, from a fraud." The image on the screen changed. Now it showed an email, its contents magnified for all to read 12. It was from Noah to Isabel. "Bella, the committee loved the piece. No one will ever know about the Czech artist. Just stick to the story. I'll handle Sophie. I'll make sure her work looks like child's play next to yours." The silence in the room was no longer one of respect. It was a dense, horrified vacuum. Catherine Delacroix let out a small, strangled gasp, her face chalk white. Mr. Delacroix looked as if he might collapse. Isabel stared at the screen, her face a mask of disbelief and terror. And Noah. Noah looked at me. The mask of the golden boy, the charming prince, finally shattered, revealing the ugly, craven thing beneath. His face was a contorted mess of fury, panic, and utter incomprehension. He had walked onto his own stage, ready to perform his masterstroke, only to find the play had been rewritten, the set redesigned, and the lead role recast. He was no longer the hero. He was the villain, exposed for all to see 13. The Foundation's integrity clause is explicit, Mrs. Vance continued, her cold gaze sweeping over the wreckage of the Delacroix family. Any attempt to defraud the committee results in immediate and permanent disqualification. Furthermore, all patronage connected to the offending parties comes under immediate and comprehensive review. She paused, letting the weight of her words crush them. The Delacroix family's long association with the Vance Foundation is, as of this moment, suspended. It was a death sentence, a quiet, poised, public execution of their entire social standing 14. Mrs. Vance then turned, her severe expression softening as her eyes found me. But this evening is not about punishing deceit. It is about celebrating true vision. The committee, upon reviewing new and compelling information, has unanimously reversed its preliminary decision. The Next Generation grant, including a full endowment for study at the Royal Art Institute in London, is awarded to the artist who demonstrated not only singular talent, but the courage and integrity to protect the very principles this foundation stands for. Her eyes held mine. The entire room turned to look at me, not with pity or scorn, but with awe. The winner, Mrs. Vance declared, her voice ringing with finality, is Miss Sophie Evans. 15. The applause that erupted was genuine, thunderous. It washed over me, a wave of vindication so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. But I did not weep, I did not gloat. I simply inclined my head in a gesture of quiet, graceful thanks. My victory was not in their ruin, but in my own ascendance. The immediate aftermath was a chaotic ballet of social disintegration. Guests began to murmur, their polite facades crumbling into undisguised gossip. Phones were already out, thumbs flying, spreading the scandal through the city's elite circles in real time. The Delacroix were radioactive. People began to subtly drift away from their table, creating a quarantine zone of shame around them. Noah, his face pale and slick with sweat, stumbled toward me. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly weak. "Sophie, how could you?" he whispered, his voice a ragged mix of accusation and pleading. "We were a team. I loved you." I looked at his hand on my arm, then met his eyes with a profound, unbridgeable calm. I didn't pull away. I simply waited, letting his touch become a symbol of his own desperate, pathetic grasp on a reality that no longer existed. "No, Noah," I said, my voice soft but clear, carrying only to him amidst the din. "You loved the idea of me. You loved a story where you were the hero who discovered me. But you never saw me, not really. Tonight, for the first time, everyone did." I gently removed his hand from my arm. It was a final, quiet act of severance. A calm refusal of his apology, his narrative, his very existence in my life 16. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. He was a ghost at a feast that was no longer in his honor. Mrs. Vance appeared at my side, a protective, powerful presence. She placed a light hand on my shoulder. "I believe our work here is done," she said, her voice a low murmur, meant only for me. The public pronouncements were over. This was the quiet conclusion. She expertly steered me away from the imploding epicenter of the Delacroix family, her movements fluid and purposeful. The crowd parted for us as if by magic, a clear path opening towards the grand doors 17. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me, but for the first time in my life, I felt no self-consciousness, no fear. I walked with my head held high, the emerald of my dress a beacon in the ivory and gold room. As we reached the foyer, a young woman I vaguely recognized as a junior editor for a society magazine rushed forward, her eyes wide with a mix of ambition and awe. "Miss Evans! An incredible turn of events! Will you be staying for the after-party?" Before I could answer, an invitation seemed to materialize in the hand of Mrs. Vance's assistant, who had appeared silently at her side. He presented it to the journalist with a polite nod. It was for a private reception being held later that week, celebrating the gallery where I had first met Mrs. Vance. My name was listed as the guest of honor. Noah's name and that of his family was conspicuously absent. The message was clear. The old guard had fallen. A new one was being anointed. 18. Sophie has other plans, Mrs. Vance said, her tone leaving no room for argument. She guided me out of the mansion and into the cool, misty night. The valet, anticipating our departure, had her car waiting, a sleek, dark Bentley, its engine purring softly. As the chauffeur held the door, Mrs. Vance paused and looked at me, a genuine, warm smile finally gracing her lips. That was impeccably done, my dear. You have a rare gift for strategy. I foresee a great many closed doors opening for you. She then gave a sly, subtle wink. And not just in the art world. 19. I slid into the plush leather seat, the scent of which was the antithesis of the cloying lilies in the ballroom. It smelled of power, of freedom, of the future. As the car pulled away, I allowed myself one last glance back at the stone mansion. Through the large ballroom windows, I could see the frantic, gesticulating figures of the Delacroix family, isolated in a sea of empty tables. They were trapped in the ruins of the life they had built, a life that had depended entirely on the approval of the woman now sitting beside me. I faced forward, turning my back on the mansion, on Noah, on the ghost of the girl I had been. The car gathered speed, leaving the manicured grounds of the estate behind, plunging into the darkness that led to the city, to the airport, to a new life. 20. Your flight to London is at 7 a.m., Mrs. Vance said, her voice calm and businesslike once more. The director of the Royal Art Institute is expecting you for lunch. He has already seen your portfolio. He's quite excited. I leaned my head back against the seat, the quiet hum of the engine a soothing balm. A year ago, I had fled that house in a torrent of tears, my life in ashes. Tonight, I was leaving it as the architect of my own rebirth, calm, in control, and on my way to London. The past was a story I had finally rewritten, and the final page had just been turned.